So we lived in several parts of Colorado, but the final station that we had was in a little town called Rocky Ford. It's on the Arkansas River, about halfway through the plains, and we enjoyed the area, and it has its challenges. It was part of the Dust Bowl at one time, and but we bought a small place on the north bank of the Arkansas River, and we expanded that over the years until we run about 600 acres, and we have at least a mile of the Arkansas River as our southern boundary, and we go up into a little county called Crowley County. It's not too small geographically, but it has very few people. It is about, including two towns, probably about 15,000 people in the whole county. It's perfect for running sheep, and that's what we started doing, was making our own flock 20 some years ago. And immediately, because of the river, we get a lot of mountain animals coming through. There are elk, deer, mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes, and some people have claimed to seen a wolf or two as they've gone by. But it became very evident very quickly for us that we had to protect the flock somehow. A lot of people who have sheep in Crowley County and also in the rest of the eastern plains along the rivers have a predation problem, a significant predation problem. And we started with Great Pyrenees. We got one or two Great Pyrenees to go out with the flock as it grazed. And as our flock has enlarged, we have enlarged our protection with Pyrenees. We have a few Pyrenees that are mixed blood with other guard dogs, but we have always gone back to the Great Pyrenees because the fact is that they are very calm. They are very they think. They look at the situation and decide exactly what should be done and how it be done. There's an awful lot of imported predator control dogs that have come into the United States and been used. Some have been very successful. They all protect the flock, but some are much more aggressive than others. A lot of people who are hiking in the mountains, they come across big flocks of sheep, and there are dogs there helping protect it, but sometimes they're a little bit too aggressive and they scare people or they threaten people. Whereas Great Pyrenees, and many times I've seen them when people come by or something like that, everybody wants to stop and see especially this time of year, we're lambing, see the baby lambs, see the ewes, and the dogs will bark, but then they'll walk up and sit between the flock and the people, and they'll just sit there. They won't threaten, they won't growl, they won't snarl. They just sit there and watch. And that's why we like them, is because they will not get us or the landowner, the flock master, in trouble with attacking something that shouldn't be attacked. And usually it's people. We've had we send our flock out to various, this time of year, to various stubble or refuse from various crops, and they graze the residue of the crop. And many times we've had little kids. We run electric wire around the flock to hold them in, and little kids will crawl into that pasture to get close to the pretty dogs and the sheep, and we've never had a problem at all. We've had several mothers call us and ask, what can they do? What can they do? The dog is standing there with their little one, and but all the times that's ever happened is well, we go out and the dog is actually making a friend with the kid. So they have that kind of temperament, unlike other Pyrenees or other guard dogs that are quite a bit more aggressive. And for flocks in the mountains where there are many predators, bears, mountain lions, especially lions. They really like sheep. It's pretty tasty, they think. And they have a much more aggressive dog. But down here, where there are people around all the time, we needed to have a dog that we could trust to use its head and also to protect the flock at the same time.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I definitely want to ask more about the breeds and the dogs and kind of how they operate on your ranch. But I think it'd also be great for folks to know a little bit more about your sheep operation too. And so could you tell us just a little bit more about your operation, maybe even a little bit about what your day-to-day kind of work looks like this time of year, and kind of give folks a sense for this beautiful place on the Arkansas River where you're running sheep?
Yeah, our original house was built in 1917, and with that we've doubled the size of it, but we kept the same architecture, which is stone. It was a Sears fieldstone house, and back in the early 1900s, when Sears was starting, you would buy a fieldstone house, and what they would send you would be forms to make big blocks, 8-inch by 12-inch blocks, and with dye, and then you would make all these blocks yourself, and then you would build the house, and you could turn it whatever color you wanted to turn it. And then our particular house has big 1-inch cables running through in between the bricks, and so when we added on to the house and essentially doubled the size of it, we got a hold of a fellow that is very conscientious, and he got bricks that are very much blend into the old house, and so that is our home, and we are totally surrounded by sheep pens, except for the highway running through on one side. And in those pens are lambing pens and pens where the mature lambs are weaned away from their mother, and surrounding all of that is pasture. Now, our pasture is unique in that it is a river bluffs. We overlook the river. We're about 100 feet higher here at the house than the river is, and the breaks run down to the river, and that's what the sheep graze. As they go down to the river, they water in the river, and then they graze the grasses and shrubs that grow going down there, and that's what our operation looks like. If you're at all familiar with the plains, it's a short grass prairie, and it has what we do is we divide all the acreages up into 60-acre pastures, and we move the sheep through those pastures, but making sure we don't overgraze anything. And so we get to rotate through 2 or 3 times a year during the growing season. And during the winter, we have a winter pasture that we put them in. And right now we're lambing. We run about 250 head of sheep, and right now we've lambed out about 120 of those ewes with the lambs, and the rest of the ewes will lamb in the next month or so. Those lambs are kept with the ewes, and they're grown to maturity that way. The flock is called a war hill. It comes from up in Wyoming, is the basis of it. The Warren Livestock Company up in Wyoming has a huge operation, millions of acres that they run sheep on, and the sheep are very they work for us very well. They're very rugged in there, and they are able to forage and do well in our operation also. So we do that, and we keep the rams in sight. They have their own special place now, since we don't need to use their services anymore. And the ewes, we have a 150-foot long barn that's 80 feet wide, and we lamb the ewes in there to protect them from the cold weather. At this time of year, it's getting cold out here, and
windy
so we
too,
bring
from what I understand.
Yeah, windy. Yeah. We do have the plains wind, and 60 mile an hour is not that unusual for us, and we need to protect the flock in this big barn. We don't put the whole flock in, but we put the pregnant ones in that are getting close, and that's kind of a skill to know what's getting close and what's got a ways to go. We lamb the sheep in there, and then and we keep them in for 3 days, and then we turn mom and babies out and into the pasture and all. So that's essentially the operation, and the dogs are there all the time. We have gone out to the early morning or in the middle of the night to check on the lambing, make sure nobody's in trouble. And many times we have found a lamb snuggled up to one of our Pyrenees. The Pyrenees will let the lambs come up and keep warm against them. They also lick the lamb to help the ewe out if she's got 2 or 3 and she's not getting to one.
Yeah, it takes some work off of mom.
Takes the work off of mom and reassures us that everything's going to be as good as possible. But that's the nature of the Pyrenees, is that they are giving and loving, but at the same time they can be really ferocious when it's a bad situation. And I occasionally there's a night that goes by where I'm not awakened by barking by the dogs, warning, and that's their main thing. Is they use the barking as warning, and then if the animal, such as the mountain lion, comes in closer, then they pack up and they make a defense. And we lost one lamb about 15 years ago. We had a pasture away. We were consuming some debris and extra for a farmer that's a friend, and we lost the lamb there, but that was when I only had one dog with the flock. It was only a flock of like 50, and I thought one dog would be fine. But I went there one morning to check, and the fence was pushed in on one side, and I counted and recounted, and I was at lambs short. And so I called the Division of Wildlife people to come over and take a look, and they found mountain lion prints. And here the mountain lion had been patrolling around that fence for a while. It had a little path that it was using. And so it had taken the lamb, but that was the only time we've ever had a predator take any of our stock, because from then on, of course, we always run at least 2 animals, and depending on the size of the flock, but no matter how small the flock, we always use 2 because they need to have help with defending it and protecting it. And during the big flock season, we have several more dogs that go with it. And several more, I mean, up to 6 or 7. When I've got 150 ewes out there, and all, then everybody goes to help out, make sure everything is good. Right. And since that's the only time we've ever lost anything to a predator.
And it sounds like from that, it sounds like from that experience, you kind of learned there's a different ratio of dogs to sheep that really works well. And so was that sort of the point where you decided, hey, I need to probably have a few more dogs?
Yeah, that is exactly right. We had up to that point been used 1 or 2 dogs with a big flock, but in retrospect, you can see if one dog is over here and its friend is not too far away, what about the other side of the flock? There's nothing there. So when we put more dogs out, they often buddy up. They have another dog with them all the time, but they'll each take a part of the pasture or the flock, and the 2 over here, there's 2 over there, 2 over here. unless there's a threat, and then they all get together in one group.
Right.
So that, at least for the Pyrenees, and that's the ones we've had the most luck with, and the ones we like dealing with, that is how they do it. Now, other guard dogs do other kind of have a different way of doing things. Some are faster, some are stronger, and some are a little bit more aggressive. And you just got to figure out. As I have just said, I've never had a child or a person get hurt by our dogs, and that is why we have this breed. But at the same time, they are excellent protectors of the flock.
Yeah. So backing up just a little bit, you know, I know you've been in a sheep operation for quite a while. So when did you first decide to start using livestock guardian dogs, and could you tell us a little bit about kind of what motivated that decision to explore that as an option for protecting your flock?
Well, 15, I can't remember for sure, 15 to 20 years ago, we were running some sheep, and we realized two things. One, we have a major highway that goes right through our place, and there's a lot of interest. People stop to look at the sheep. I got no problem with that. And then when the dog's in, actually, they stop more than they did before, because the dogs are always entertaining for them.
Right.
But we got a little worried about, the sheep being unprotected when we're not close to them, and we aren't aware of what's going on. So we needed to think of something or come across something that would help protect them where we don't have to supervise all the time. And I had some older friends that had run sheep for a long time, and one of them specifically liked putting dogs on, and then it took us, as I said before, a little while to find the right dog. But the Great Pyrenees, not every individual is different, people and dogs, but we found dogs that met what we needed, and so we integrated those into the flock, and we have bred puppies out of that, and we have been very, very successful with our puppies because of that. People got to know them, and people as far away as Kansas and Wyoming and in New Mexico have come to buy some of our puppies, and we haven't had very many puppies recently, but because of the reputation they have, the breed has a certain reputation, but the dogs that we have selected emphasize that reputation of being very smart, very intuitive, and but very protective. Right. But not to the point of injury unless they feel that it has to be.
Yeah. And so when you first brought those dogs into your flock, what kind of goes into training them? Do they sort of naturally know what to do, or do you have to monitor their behavior and sort of guide them in the right direction for protecting the sheep?
But what we do is we get when a female has puppies, she has them in the flock. And she raises them in the flock from the time they're old enough to stand up and walk out and take a look at things. They're bumping noses with sheep, and that's always very entertaining, because here's this puppy. They're never very small, but they're about 7-9 pounds, standing there bumping noses with all these sheep, and the sheep are looking at them wondering what in the world they are. But then they realize, oh, they're just like all the other dogs, only a smaller version. And so immediately those puppies integrate into the flock. And like always, there's one that's, or not one, but there are some that are very good at being in the flock, very content with being in the flock, and others are more content, visiting with people. So a lot of times some of these puppies are sold to families with young kids, and they then guard the kids. They don't care what kind of animal it is. They'll take care of it. But some of the dogs are very much bonded with the sheep, and so that's how they get into the flock. And really, everything they do is natural. We don't. The only thing we teach them is not to cross the fences and just use their head, kind of thing. And that's very little. They're not. It's not a big training process. It's a very easy process. As long as you get dogs that are used to doing that, they're bred to do it. And if you have sheep, they do that. Now, a lot of people use the same dog, and we've sold a lot of dogs to people in rural areas and semi-rural areas up by Denver area as home guards, guards for kids, and those kind of things. And
right.
Everybody's been pretty happy with them. Yeah.
Yeah. So just for folks who don't know, it sounds like kind of the two main products that you sell. You of course sell your lamb meat, which is part of from your sheep operation, but then part of your business now is also selling these puppies occasionally. And does that kind of help round off the costs of having livestock guardian dogs? Do a lot of folks do that, from what you know, kind of sell some of the puppies, or is that more something you just wanted to do as part of your operation?
They are. There's a lot of people that have guard dogs and they raise puppies. And the one thing I found is, and why we raised the puppies, was that it's a little difficult to find the perfect dog unless you're breeding with the perfect dog. And so that's a whole lot easier than it's not a natural. It's natural for Pyrenees to guard what they assume is their responsibility, whether it's kids or people or animals. And ours always are much more inclined to guard animals or the sheep as such. But they also, there's one or two at times. We have two at the house here that bonded with Mary and me, and they stay at the house and they take care of things at the house, while the others go wandering off with the sheep, as they're supposed to do too. So the individual has a lot to do with it. And when people are looking for puppies, they need to know what they need them for. These dogs have to work. If you don't have a job for them, they will discover one themselves.
Whether you want them to do that job or not.
Yes, that's exactly right. So they're very smart. Their want to is always in question. You have to understand whether they want to, or make it important or interesting for them to do it. And so there is a training process that needs to go. The instinct is there. Teaching them what to do, though, is what has to be trained into them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I think the thing that I was most curious about when I started learning about this and talking with you was the actual behavior of these dogs. So what they're actually doing physically to deter predators, and kind of the different strategies they have based on the different wildlife that are out there around Crowley County. So could you tell us a little bit more about kind of their behaviors and what they're doing when they're actively protecting the flock? And as you're doing that, maybe provide some examples of some of the wildlife they're interacting with and what they do.
Yeah, the dogs they're usually spread out at night, and that's usually when the predation occurs. Is the predators come up at night, seeing what's easy to grab and eat, and so the dogs. And I've had many people see me later in town or someplace, and they say, they ask me, say, what good are those dogs of yours? And every time I drive by, they're sleeping. And I tell them, I said, well, they're sleeping because they're awake all night. They know that that's the busy time, and so they act. When the flock is up close, I hear them barking almost all night. They're a barky dog. They're not one that you can put in the backyard and not have your neighbors come over and visit with you about this 110, 125-pound dog barking all night. Barking is their warning signal. And with us, it goes on a lot. As I said, we have packs of coyotes. We have lions. We've seen a couple lions here. Bobcats also come down here, and sometimes human predators kind of thing. And the dogs will bark, and they will group together in a flock or a pack if that threat proceeds to come close to the sheep or where the sheep are. And so many times I've been woken up at night by a lot of barking. You get eight dogs together that way, that kind of weight, and they're all barking. They will wake you up. There's no doubt about it. But I don't mind it at all, because that means something has gotten really serious and need to get up and go out and see what the whole deal is and all. So other than that, during the day, they're scattered throughout the flock. You think they're sleeping, but when the flock moves away, they get up and they walk over and they get in the middle again and lay down and snooze a little bit more, because they've been up all night, kind of thing, and all. So
Right.
a lot of the guard dogs have a intuitive response to things. And I've been talking about the Pyrenees, but there's other breeds, Anatolians, Akbash, all kinds, and they have different responses. And a lot of those responses, except for the mountain guys, have been really not acceptable in a more populated area. And I wouldn't say ours is populated. We have a car pass by about once every 5 minutes on the highway. Nobody walks by and things like that, but there are people here, and the dogs need to know the difference. Whereas, as I say, some of the other breeds are not that good. In fact, I know they have had problems with hikers in the mountains coming across these mountain sheep that are put up there for graze that have dogs, and the dogs are more of the wolf and mountain lion deterrence, and they're a bit more aggressive. I've never heard of anybody being bitten, but I've heard of a lot of people gotten scared to death when 2 or 3 of these dogs line up and come at them, and then they stop and bark, and they're warning. This is say, hey, this is my flock behind me, and you shouldn't be walking over here.
Right.
And I've talked to several people like that, and some were just terrified to death. And I said, well, just listen to what the dog's saying and go around it, and then they'll be happy and you'll be happy, and that kind of thing, and all. So the response to the defense is almost more important than the defense,
Right.
especially with people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, we see the research all the time on mountain lion behavior, and for the most part, they really don't want to be in urban areas. They don't want to be in ag lands looking for food. That's not something they seek out, but they, like any other wildlife, want the easiest meal. And it seems like kind of what you're saying is these dogs sort of change that calculation in the mind of an animal, saying, hey, this probably isn't going to be worth the effort, given how large and in charge of the flock this dog is. And from what you've told me before and in previous conversations, it sounds like the dogs, they don't really want to hurt wildlife necessarily, right? They're more interested in kind of changing that decision in the animal's mind of, hey, I'm big and intimidating, and you don't want to pick this battle. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, that's it. Yeah, exactly right. They're not there to, and they're not of the mindset to chase it down and kill it. They're of the mindset to just make it go somewhere else. Walk away, walk around, and but they don't attack. Now, if they come across a predator that has hurt an animal, or the blood is on the ground, then that all changes. All bets are off. But that happens, and I'm told by the guys up in the mountains, that happens very rarely with their dogs. That usually the dogs keep everything just pretty safe, and they know the predators are out there, and all, but they are always being protected. And so the predators come take a look, see if it's an easy meal. If it isn't, they'll go somewhere else and get an easy meal.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned the folks who are in the mountains, because there are some obvious differences in terms of the amount and the types of wildlife that are in your area versus other areas in Colorado. And from your conversations with different agriculture producers and ranchers, you're obviously using livestock guardian dogs, and they've been really effective for you. How do those compare to kind of other methods that people in your community use for deterring predators? I know obviously some people use lethal methods, trapping, poisoning, shooting, but of course there's other non-lethal methods too. So how would you compare livestock guardian dogs to some of the other strategies that people take to deter predation?
Well, obviously, because we run dogs and have for more than 20 some years, we believe that this is the most effective way to protect your flock and at the same time cause the least damage. Just like you said, a lot of people will bring in greyhounds, and they will chase and try to run down predators they think that killed their animals. That has always seemed to me to be misapplied and not very successful, because who's to say 2 days from now that the mountain lion that got this kid or lamb is the same one that you're chasing to kill, is the same one that just predated that 2 days ago. There's no way to tell. They don't leave calling cards. They just leave the destruction there behind them. So rather than chasing all the wild predators around in a melee and maybe not even getting the one that is giving you a problem, then the defense is to just make sure it doesn't come on, and that's what we do, and that's what we want. A lot of people do not. They don't have these dogs. They don't like to have the dog barking at night. They don't like things like that. People have their own options and prejudices. We do not feel, and I've gotten to the point now, as I say, unless the bark changes, I sleep right through the night. And all. So this going out and getting quote unquote, I've seen things where somebody hired a hunter pack of dogs, and they got like 2 or 3 mountain lions, and they got the skins up, and the first thing I ask is, how do you know those lions were the ones that hit the flock or hurt whatever out there? So it's got to be them. They were around and and it doesn't have to be them, and it's a waste. It's just a waste. I'd rather stop the predator from predating than going out and trying to slaughter everything that moves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was also going to ask a little bit about kind of comparing the cost of livestock guardian dogs to some of those other methods. But I know from things you've told me in the past, maybe cost isn't the only consideration. You've been able to round out some of the costs, I know, just from selling puppies. But it sounds like, so is cost something that is a deterrent for some people with livestock guardian dogs? They think it's going to be too expensive to implement?
I don't think they've ever thought that, but what it's going to be is too bothersome. You get a puppy 8 weeks old, and you got to teach it that the flock is where it belongs. You got to make sure that it's always in the flock, and it learns growing up that, hey, this is my litter mates here, all these white fuzzy things, and that really the training of the dog, it's not very hard. It really isn't. But it is an effort that has to be made, and a lot of people are not do not want to take the time or the effort to do it, and so the training is really what gets the people hung up, and it's not that hard, because these dogs automatically know they need to guard something, and you just need to tell them and show them what to guard, and then they will. That's why they're called guard dogs. They are born for that, and they can perform well. But a lot of people don't like dogs. Other people are afraid of dogs. There's a lot of prejudices out there. But when it comes time to protect your animals, you need to pick the best method, and that's what I tell people is, the same litany I'm just gone through. I use with other people that are growing animals. Is you got to have the dog and teach the dog and reward the dog and let it know it's doing a good job, and then you won't have to wake up at night and worry about people around here some have pigs, some have goats and sheep, and anything that can't defend itself will be predated if it isn't protected in some manner.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of a great motivational statement for folks who might be interested in this. And the fact that these dogs aren't just used for sheep is really important, right? They can, there's incidents with chickens, there's incidents with all sorts of livestock, but these dogs are pretty versatile and that they just need to guard something. And so if you show them what to guard, it sounds like they will do that. Are there any other tips that you would give to folks who are interested in maybe getting some guardian dogs or, integrating dogs into their own operation?
The main tip to think about is get the puppy young. Don't get a 3-month-old puppy. Get the puppy. I've had people want 6-week-old puppies, and that's a little bit marginal to me. They're not quite weaned, but no later than 8 weeks. And then show the dog and have the patience to show the dog, and put it with something that's not going to hurt it, because that's not going to work very well. To have it get hurt or beat up by something you wanted to protect. But you can take a couple old views and turn the puppies out with them, and the ewes are used to the dogs, and they're not a big deal. And so the puppy grows to a bigger size with these older animals that are not going to hurt them, and they learn, and they automatically then learn, hey, these are the type of things that I need to protect, and all. It's a matter of getting the animals young and showing them and making it a pleasant experience. Just figure out a way that they can learn and work with those animals, and they're not that hard to train, but you can do some wrong things with them, and especially with like Pyrenees, they're not a dog that you spank. Some people, they have the dogs and they, if they don't do it right, they whack them somehow. And Pyrenees don't accept that. That imprints them pretty hard, and they have to just be, you have to treat them like a kid. You don't go whacking your kid for doing something that he didn't understand. You try to guide it and all like that. So there's a little effort until you get a dog or two on the place, and then the puppies then learn from them, and it's easier. I know a couple times when we first started out, we wound up without an older dog to teach puppies, and that was a little bit of a excitement and work. But after that, we always have had other dogs to show the little ones what they can do and should do.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of a self-perpetuating process, which is encouraging. So I do want to pivot a little bit and ask you about kind of regenerative practices on your operation. And so maybe we could just start. Could you kind of tell us what regenerative ranching means to you and what that looks like on your sheep ranch?
Well, regenerative is that you don't graze it to the ground. That you have to understand how much of the grass and shrubs are left to regenerate themselves, to have seeds and or to grow back. And that's why we have our place divided up into 60-acre fields, not fields, but range fields. And the sheep are on that, and they're watched every day. I go out and see how the forage is doing. You know, when it's spring and it's growing and we got rains, that's one thing. But then our rains usually end latter part of the summer, and then the grass goes dormant, and we go all the way through the winter with no growth. So you have to make sure that when spring comes, there's a regenerative enough forage there that the grass will grow quickly and well, and all. So what is the forage doing? What does it need to have done to it? The good thing about sheep is that the first thing they'll eat is weeds, and then they'll go to the grass. So you know, they're very, very good. In fact, over the years, I've had people ask me to put the sheep out on a place or something where the weeds are just rank, and the sheep go and they eat it down, and 3-4 weeks later you go back and there's nothing but grass showing. So they have their preferences, and they have a very sheep have a very strong position in agriculture for their point. They will ignore a lot of things and concentrate on the things that really most people don't want to see or have on their property.
Right. Yeah. And I know, you know, especially from these pictures that we're showing, you live in a pretty dry part of Colorado. And as I'm sure you know, what the Western United States is experiencing some major drought conditions right now and loss of snowpack. Are you feeling the effects of some of those drought conditions on your sheep ranch? And if so, are you doing anything about it or plan on doing anything about that?
Well, we haven't, we are always dry. I mean, 12 inches of rain a year is just average for us out here. But because we don't have a lot of noxious weeds, you know, the thing about a weed is the minute moisture hits it, it germinates, and then whatever moisture falls, it gets that high. And so it can rob natural forage, grasses and shrubs and things like that, of all the moisture. It just steals it right from them. And that's what the sheep do, is they keep the weeds down, and if not, it'll totally eliminate them. And all, so that the grass can take advantage of it, and the shrubs. We have you know, sagebrush and things like that grow with the grass on our place, and all. So essentially, what they do is they proliferate the grass and help it get strong, and they naturally control the weeds, and that's what we move them around in pastures for, is for them to eat the weeds, and then when the weeds are nibbled down to nothing, then we move them over to the next pasture, and then we move them around. You know, rotational grazing is what they used to call it all the time. Right. And then we allowed, by that time, the grass is growing up to a pretty decent size and height, and so the sheep can go on it and take advantage of that. But then we also move them out before they overgraze the grass, and so we always look at first graze are weeds, and the second and third graze are on grass. And then you know, if it's that bad of a year, we've got to do something else. There's a lot of people here and I'll go up and down to the river and all, and that's where the rivers come in handy. It's because the you know, it's low lying and with moisture and stuff, so it produces an awful lot more forage for us that we can use in when the upland grazing is gotten tough.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like, you know, sheep sort of inherently are a little bit easier to manage a regenerative agriculture kind of operation with, just inherently in how they graze. I also noticed, you know, throughout this slideshow, there's been a couple of pictures of your sheep eating melons and pumpkins. Could you tell us a little bit more about what's going on in those pictures and why your sheep are eating those things?
Everybody wants to see what they're doing there. Down here, a lot of our farmers are irrigated farmers. We have nothing but irrigated farmers here. The Arkansas River Valley is known for its long, hot days, and so vegetables do excellent. They do really well, and but the problem is that the consumer in King Super or whatever it is, your supermarket, wants the perfect looking melon or pumpkin or anything like that. And so the ones that are kind of misshapen or odd or, that kind of thing, they just throw those away. And years ago, I started taking dump trucks over and they would fill them up. And now they still do that. And we bring those trucks home, and when in midsummer, it works out well, because midsummer is when they're harvesting those, and that's when the grass is kind of getting a little bit weak because of the lack of moisture, natural moisture. So we feed them pumpkins and cantaloupe, and to top everything off, later in the summer we feed them onions.
Oh.
They love onions. It's pretty tough to get in a barn with a bunch of sheep that have been eating onions, but
I was going to ask.
it definitely on their breath. But being a rumen, they don't. It doesn't bother them at all. They do very, very well on onions. And I might just put in case somebody wants to try it. Don't feed onions to cows. Hills cows, and that's kind of odd to me because they're both ruminants, but cows cannot tolerate the chemicals that the onions put out, where sheep just do wonderful with them. They love them, and they get fat on them, and doesn't, other than bending over to get something out of somebody's hoof and having it breathe on you, it's not a problem at all. So,
and it doesn't give the meat sort of an oniony aftertaste. I mean, maybe that would be a good thing. But...
Yeah. There you go. You don't have to season your meal. No, they don't. It doesn't affect the meat at all.
Interesting.
No. So,
yeah, I guess that's just kind of a unique thing I wasn't aware with sheep, and in addition to kind of how they're already an effective grazer in many ways, it's interesting that they're helping sort of reduce the food waste issue as well. So, that's just exciting. I'm glad you could share that with us. I do, David and Mary, I have more questions for you, but I would love to maybe pivot now and give other folks some chance to learn a little bit from you too. I just want to remind folks, David and Mary have a wealth of knowledge on both the regenerative ag practices and the livestock guardian dogs. So hopefully you've been thinking and ruminating, for lack of a better term, over what to be asking them. So before I do that, David and Mary, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us about your operation, or maybe even something about kind of, I know this is a bit of a softball question, but what you like most about getting to be sheep ranchers there in Crowley County?
It's what we like is the ability to see animals that are content and well-fed, and that are producing protege that our lambing, we have twins and triplets very often, and it's because of what we feed them, and it kind of makes us feel good that we are able to give these animals enough nutrition and all that they can have more. And then of course we benefit from that too, in that we have more lambs to sell and keep our our operation in order here. But we are proud of our lambs. We are proud of the quality of the meat. Our meat is very, very well known. It is very much, it does not have the very strong lamb taste that a lot of people just despise. It has a mild, very flavorful taste, and it's because of how they're run, because they're not stressed, because they're not, they're not, whenever anybody has to put extra energy into doing something, it comes out in the meat. The meat gets leaner and tougher and all like that. And our sheep are well known all over, at least eastern and in the eastern Colorado, and then in the cities along the Front Range. We have a lot of people that come and get meat from us, everything from a barbecue, the whole lamb to cuts and things like that, and everybody is very happy with what they get, and so we're very very proud of that and all, and then it's what we do and how we do it, and how we work with the sheep and how the dogs take care of them, and that's very important too. Is that the dogs take the pressure and the worry out of what's around the bush away, and so the sheep can just graze and be content.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I will say, you might have noticed Mary didn't say as much today, and that was sort of her idea. She kind of wanted to turn things over a little bit more to David, but Mary and David, feel free to answer the questions, and either of you or whoever would like to tackle them. I think what we're going to do now is turn it over to the question and answer period. So again, feel free to just raise your hand so we can kind of queue you up to ask a question. And of course, if you don't want to unmute or can't unmute for some reason to ask your question directly to David and Mary, you can put it in the chat and we'll ask it on your behalf. So thank you, David and Mary. We'll give you a big silent but friendly round of applause on Zoom for that excellent presentation. And yeah, let's turn it over and hear some questions. Okay, so while we're waiting, I think Chelsea's getting the questions up and ready to go. I did see the first one pop up in the chat from Jan Black. She asked, besides raising lambs for meat, have you ever considered shearing them for their wool?
We always shear our sheep. The flock is white. It's not the dark-headed Suffolk ewe has a very coarse wool, and the amount of money given for that wool is less than 25% of what our wool goes for. Our wool is very fine. It goes into sweaters and scarves and things like that, and it doesn't agitate your skin, doesn't scratch it or whatever. A lot of people say, "Oh, I put wool on, it just itches like crazy." Well, that's because they bought a thick, coarse wool sweater. If you get the nice one, coarse cashmere is the ultimate kind of thing. But our wool is not very far behind. We shear once a year. We have a crew of anywhere from 3 to 5 come in, depending upon how busy they are, and they take all day to shear the whole flock, and then that wool is sold down to a fellow in south of Colorado, and it's sold down to New Mexico. He sells in New Mexico, who turns around and sells it to the Chinese. So all that Chinese wool stuff that feels so good really originated in Colorado, I guess. So.
Thank you. That's interesting. All right, I think Chelsea's going to take it from here on asking some of the questions that are popping up. So take it away, Chelsea.
Okay, so we had some that popped into the chat. So Pamela wants to know, what months are the lambs born?
Because of the kind of open winters that we have moved our lambing season up more and more. We are now about halfway through lambing this month. one of the reasons for that is, as I said, the weather is pretty good. We have had some cold weather, but most of the time we're in the 50s and 60s during the day. At night it freezes. But the lambs do very well. They're doing very good, and probably will stick with moving the breeding up and all. One thing about it is, for those people that might have some sheep, you can get inserts to bring a ewe into estrus and breed at off times, but you really don't need to. If you've got good rams, whenever you put them with the ewes, they will go ahead and breed. It's like we never used any synthetic emphasis at all on our ewes, and all of them were bred. And as I say, we about half, 2/3 finished with lambing. I've got about 175 lambs on the ground, and I got probably another 80 or so to go as soon as the ewes decide to have them. And you can do that. If you have sheep, you can turn the rams in, and they will, unless it's boiling hot. Now, the heat stops all breeding and all, but you can turn the rams in at any other time, and they will breed for you and have lambs out of, quote unquote, out of season.
All right, we have 2 more questions, and then Logan has some questions. Do you use any other methods of predator deterrent?
No. Yeah, just dogs. I do have a couple of rifles, but I haven't shot them in about 5 years. So the dogs take care of everything.
Okay. Has anyone ever seen the dogs respond to predators? And what is the response to one cougar versus a female cougar with like 2 yearlings in tow? Or will dogs attack the cougars or stand and bark? Like, what do the dogs do if there's more than one?
Yeah. We have not seen a female with young. Everything changes, of course, when you get a female anything with young. But the dogs will come in mass. Like, as I said, we always run multiple dogs with our flocks, and one will bark, and everybody knows what it's saying, and they rush over there, and they stand shoulder to shoulder and face the predator, and then they move toward the predator. But their barking is their main source of a warning. I can hear them bark 2 miles away, and when the predator sees that there are more than one, that's when I talked about having more than one. They will move off, and they will run away and go someplace else where it may be an easy meal. But that's why we have multiple dogs, and they only take care of. They always take care of the threat, and we rarely see the threat. I've seen it occasionally, but I've heard it many, many times.
Yeah, and I remember from a previous conversation we had, David, you mentioned that they're pretty good. The dogs are pretty good at kind of responding based on the situation. So, if there's too many, potential threats, they know to leave one dog behind, and then, have another dog kind of lay chase or bark at them more. So it sounds like they're pretty good at kind of understanding based on the situation what to do, as long as, like you said, you have the right number of dogs with the flock. I just thought that was really interesting. Some of your stories about how they're pretty intuitive. They know when to stick around or when to do chase or whatever it might be. So a couple of questions from staff that I wanted to ask on their behalf. So first of all, just scrolling back through here. So one of our staff members was curious if, let's see, so do you feel that there are benefits of predators on the landscape? So from a ranching perspective, is it actually good to have, mountain lions, coyotes, and these other carnivore species around?
Well, all I can speak of is for us here there's a lot of deer, and we have elk also, and there's not much for them to eat along the river, and they go into the fields at night, where people are raising alfalfa and stuff like that. Too many of those grazers would essentially get the farmers up in arms, and they would then, I'm hopefully everybody's taking this with a grain of salt, but I know for sure that the farmers get irritated when they get hit really hard by grazers that have ruined their crop, knocked the corn over, ate half the corn, or things like that. So having a smaller number is a whole lot easier for the farmers to take and not get upset about and want to do something very drastic. That, because the grazers have gotten out of control. And that's just kind of that's kind of the way it is, and that's the reality of it. So the predators serve a purpose. They always serve a purpose. I just don't want them serving a purpose on my place. But I have no problem with them coming by. I've seen them walk across the road here many times, many of them. And I got no problem with that. I'm not one that gets all excited when a coyote or a lion or a bobcat. We've had a lot of bobcats this year. If they're just going up and down the river, that's fine. That's them. And if my sheep aren't part of it, then that's fine. And I think that's what the dogs do. They push them away, and then they go someplace where the sheep aren't and do their thing. So they serve. I am one that believes strongly that they serve a purpose. The grazers serve a purpose, and the predators serve a purpose to get population control.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. So another question from staff. I believe this will be one of our last ones, but I'll double check in the chat. Do you pasture lamb, or do you lamb indoors?
This time of year, I've got the lamb indoors.
Okay.
We're getting down around 0 every night, and so the heavy, we call them heavies, the ones that have big udders and are ready to have their lambs, we put up by the barn, and at night I put them in the barn. I just absolutely despise going out at 1 o'clock in the morning and finding a frozen lamb on the ground. There's no sense to that. And so we do most of our lambing in the barn. We have jails for them. We keep them in jails for 12 hours or so, and then we turn them out. By then, the lamb is vigorous. It's found where the milk's at and this kind of thing. And so then we turn them out onto the pasture with their moms, and they do well.
Okay. Well, David and Mary, I just want to say a big thank you. We're also, I know you can't see this, but in the chat, we're getting some thank yous and gratitude from a lot of folks. So I just want to say it's been great to hear about, not only your dogs and how exciting, and I will say adorable they are, watching these pictures, but also getting to learn a little bit more about sheep ranching and what goes into that. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're more welcome. I always appreciate people's interest in what we're doing and how we're trying to do it, and to help everybody, all the animals, both wild and ours, to do the best they can. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, in case folks are interested in learning more about livestock guardian dogs, Chelsea posted some links in the chat. So we have the link to our own website, the page on keeping livestock safe, which has quite a bit of information both on dogs and other methods. There's a link that provides kind of an overview of the different dog breeds if you're interested in learning more about that. David and Mary shared a great Facebook page with me that's a kind of a landing page and community for people who are interested in this. So you can follow that link. And then lastly, I would strongly encourage folks to take a look at David and Mary's website. We dropped a link to that as well. Not only if you're interested in learning more about their operation, but also they have hundreds of photos of their dogs and sheep. So if that's something you want to take a closer look at, I'd recommend following that link. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And above all, thank you, David and Mary, again, for your time and willingness to share with us today. And Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for being here.